from engaging in personalities toward the president. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 4th, 2021, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and still I rise, a very proud, liberated Democrat, unbought and unbossed. And I rise today with a question, Madam Speaker. The question is, should the taxpayers of this country, the good people of the United States of America, should their tax dollars be utilized to pay for the upkeep, the maintenance, the utilities on a building that is named in honor of a bigot and a racist? Should our tax dollars be used for such a purpose? Madam Speaker, let me share something with you. This is the Senate Russell Office Building, the Russell Senate Office Building. This is how it looks. It has a certain degree of majesty associated with it. This is where senators do their work. The press is found in this building in an area just off of a rotunda. This is the Russell Senate Office Building. This is what it looks like to the naked eye. This is what people see when they drive by. Unfortunately, there is much to be seen that the eye cannot reveal to the brain. This building, named after this man, Senator Richard Russell, this building is a symbol of national shame. A symbol of national shame. And I think that because it is a symbol of national shame, and I shall say more to you about it as I do what I'm about to do, which is to label it for what it is, a symbol of national shame. We ought not pretend that this building is a place that ought to honor a person with such a name. A symbol of national shame. Paid for with tax dollars. These lights, the utilities, paid for with tax dollars. Who was Senator Richard Russell? This is the senator, Madam Speaker, who in 1935 participated in the very first filibuster of a civil rights bill. Senator Richard Russell. When he and his colleagues stopped an anti-lynching bill with 6 days of nonstop talking. Senator Richard Russell, the Russell Senate Office Building. Senator Richard Russell, in so doing, allowed the lynching to continue without legislation that was antithetical to it. In this country, up to 1968, some 3,446 persons, more than 3,000 black people were lynched in the United States of America. There are people who don't want to hear this. There are people who would say, wait, at some point we'll get around to doing the right thing. We'll bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice and we'll change the name on this building. There are some people who would say, wait, Al, don't bring this up now. I refuse to allow those who are not suffering to determine the timeline for the suffering to end for those who do suffer. I am one of those who happens to be suffering. It is painful for me to see this symbol of national shame in the United States of America, the country I love. I believe that it is time now for us to make that change. We've had some 40 plus years, about 49 years to change this, and we haven't done it. It's time to change it. And I'm not going to wait for someone else to say it's okay to come to the floor and say you can make this change. I am a liberated, unbought, unbossed Democrat. It's time for this to change. It's got to change. Well, how soon should we change this? Well, immediately, if not sooner. And if it doesn't change today, doesn't change tomorrow, I will still stand my ground. It has to change, and I will await that change. It must change. A little bit more about Senator Russell. It was in 1972, shortly after his demise, that the Senate voted overwhelmingly, 99-1, that the old Senate office building be named the Russell Senate Office Building. 99-1. They knew when they did it he was a bigot and a racist. And I assure you, when I say it ought to happen immediately, I assure you there are some names that I could give tonight, this evening, of people who have similar histories, who are still alive. And if we named a building after one of these people, this Congress would assemble and would change that name immediately. I know what we can do when we want to do something. So there's no question about whether there's a way to get this done. The question is, do we have the will to do it? Do we have the will to take a racist and a bigot's name off of a building that is housing the Senate, members of it? I decline to go into the building. I will never say that I will never go in, simply because there are times when, of necessity, I may have to. But when I do it with a degree of shame. I am not proud when I have to go into that building. The last time I was there, it was to show some other persons the rotunda where his statue happens to be. He occupies a space all to himself. It's not like going through other areas where you see multiple personalities represented. He has a space all to himself, a bigot and a racist. And we, who have the power to make the change, tolerate it. A bit more about Senator Russell. Here's a statement from the senator, perhaps not a direct, exact quote, but here's a statement from the senator. As one who was born and reared in the atmosphere of the Old South, with 6 generations of my forebears now resting beneath Southern soil, I am willing to go as far and make a great sacrifice to preserve and ensure white supremacy. Some things bear repeating. He said to preserve and ensure white supremacy in the social, economic, and political life of our state as any man who lives within her borders. He's taking a pledge to maintain white supremacy. Senator Richard Russell, Senate office building in his honor and in his name. Let's just continue with a bit more about Senator Richard Russell. Senator Richard Russell blocked the passage of a 1942 bill to eliminate poll taxes. Senator Richard Russell co-authored the Southern Manifesto in 1956 with Senator Strom Thurmond in opposition to the integration of public schools. Fought integration. It was segregation. He was a segregationist. It was segregation that caused me to get on a bus that was in disrepair, that would break down, to ride within blocks of other schools predominated with persons who are Anglo or were Anglo at the time. Ride past those schools for some 20 to 30 minutes to get to another school in another city. That's what segregation did. It was segregation that caused me to get books that were hand-me-downs when the other schools where Anglos had the books, when they were finished with the books, when they got new books, then I could get a better book that was not the latest edition of the book I needed. It was segregation that caused me to have to go to colored water fountains. It was segregation that put me in the back of the bus. It was segregation that forced me to the balcony of the movie. It was segregation that locked us up in the bottom of the jails. I know segregation. I know what it looks like. I've seen its ugly face. The Klan burned a cross in my yard. I know what it smells like. I've had to drink from those filthy water fountains. I know what it sounds like. I've had people to call me ugly names. So I just hope my friends will not get too discombobulated when they hear that Al Green came to the floor and said what he's saying now. Don't expect me to tolerate this. You can get some others to do it, but you won't get me to do it. I will not tolerate this. I demand that this change take place. I'm not asking. Why would I engage in the protocols of polite society when this level of bigotry exists in my face? Let's talk a little bit more about Senator Richard Russell. He led the 60-day filibuster against the Civil Rights Act of 1964, led the Southern boycott of the Democratic National Convention in 1964 after LBJ, one of the greatest presidents ever in my opinion, signed the Civil Rights Act. He called the Civil Rights Act short-sighted and dangerous. Those Civil Rights Acts, the Act of 1965, when President Johnson signed it, he signed it in ink, but it was written with the blood of those who crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, the Honorable John Lewis having been one of them. I remember talking to him. He said he thought he was going to die. Signed in ink, but written in blood. John Lewis was a great and noble American. That Civil Rights Act is probably the reason that I'm here. I probably wouldn't be in Congress if not but for what happened on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. People who had the desire to see liberty and justice for all, but who also had the ability to take the blows to their bodies without resorting to retaliation. If they had retaliated on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, it would have been just another melee. It would have been just another skirmish, but they didn't. And because they suffered, I'm able to stand here and make these comments. So you can well understand, I hope and I pray, that because I know how I got here, I'm not going to tolerate this. I know how I got here. I didn't get here because I'm so smart. I got here because somebody found out what a 90-pound German Shepherd bites like. I'm here because somebody understands what it's like to go to jail for a cause. I'm here because somebody understands what it's like to lose a loved one, Merle Evers, for a cause. So let's not play games. I'm not here to satisfy and satiate those who would say, wait, give us a chance to do this on our own terms. You've had 49 years. 49 years too many, in my opinion. So I'm not going to wait. And I'll be back again to talk more about this after I finish what I'm about to say now. Senator Richard Russell, twice, 1949 and 1964, introduced legislation. It's a painful thing to read. This is a painful thing to have to utter. Twice introduced legislation to move African Americans out of southern states. That's Senator Richard Russell. So, dear friends, I beg your pardon if anyone takes offense at what I have said. But I must tell you, I'd say it again, and probably will, given the opportunity. Because at some point in life, you just have to take a stand. The people who sent me here, they didn't send me here to go along as a result of toleration of things like this. They didn't send me here to go along so that I could move along. They sent me here to take a stand. And there are times in life when it is better to stand alone than not stand at all. I'm a liberated Democrat. I stand alone, but I stand on truth. I stand on the words of Carlyle. No lie can live forever. This is the ultimate manifestation of insidious prevarication to imply that this should be honored with the name of Russell. Now, there are those who are going to say, well, Al Green, what would you name the building? A tactic quite often used, because then when I say, well, let's name it, you complete the sentence. They will say, well, I think it ought to be named, you complete the sentence. But that's not what I'm saying, dear brothers and sisters. And I say brothers and sisters because in my heart, I believe there's just one race, as Dr. King put it, the human race. And I believe that all persons are created equal from a base black to a treble black, from a base black to a treble white, on God's keyboard, as he put it. So, my dear brothers and sisters, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying take this name off, Russell. I'm saying let it revert back to the name it had before Russell was placed on it. That name was the old Senate office building. I'm saying let it revert back to the old Senate office building, and you decide the name. The name I will leave to you until and unless there is a need to prevent this from happening again, something similar. But there are many people worthy of having this building bear their names. This man is not worthy. This man does not deserve this honor. So let it revert back to the old Senate office building, and then do what we do, get a committee, get a commission, find a way to name it appropriately, and then I believe that those that I speak for who do not live in the sweets of life, who live in the streets of life, those that I speak for who are among the least, the last, and the lost, those that I speak for who are not among the well-off, the well-heeled, and the well-to-do, those that I speak for, many of whom have gone to glory. But I believe that they will find reason to know that change, long though it may be in coming, that change can take place, and that this country will be a better place for it. The country I love, by the way. I'm not the guy that you're going to tag with this mantra, this label, this caption, this style. He doesn't love his country. I love my country. I'm not the guy that you're going to tag with, he's a flag burner. I wear the flag. You can't tag me with being the guy who refuses to stand for the national anthem. I stand and I sing the national anthem. You can't tag me with being the guy who refuses to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I say the Pledge of Allegiance. So now, tag me, label me as the guy who loves his country and who refuses to accept this level of bigotry, who refuses to accept allowing the tax dollars from people who are eking out a place in the world for their tax dollars to be used for this. I'm that guy. I'm the guy who's going to stand up for this, against this, if you will. And finally, this. I never came to Congress to say what I'm saying. I came to Congress to help people who were in need of housing. That was what I thought I'd do. I came to Congress to help people get a decent day's pay for a hard day's work. This is not something that I planned, but it's something that I cannot stand, and I have to stand against it. There's just something that won't allow me to tolerate this. And I know that this will engender some additional detractors. I get the calls. I know. But there just comes a time in your life when you have to decide that there are some things worth making a sacrifice for. I choose to do what I do because I know how I got here. And Madam Speaker, I'm grateful for the time, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 4th, 2021, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gohmert, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And it's an honor to follow my fellow formal judge from Texas. And we both know Jesus, and one of Jesus' comments was that if we were just lukewarm, we'd be spit out of the mouth. And I know my friend's heart, and he is passionate about things that he sees as unjust. So I know he's in no danger of ever being spit out because he does have that passion and care so deeply. So we disagree on different things, but I would absolutely yield to my friend.
I thank the gentleman for his kind words. You and I spoke earlier today, and I believe that there are people who assume things about us that are just not true. There are probably people who assume that you and I don't get along, but they don't understand that there are things that can bring people together that supersede the physicalities that we place all of our emphasis on. And I would have the world know that you and I talk and that we don't have hard conversations about the things that are important to both of us. And I appreciate your kind words. Well, and I will, of course, yield your time back to you.
Well, I know that we're brothers, and we're going to be together for a long time. And I'm not talking about here in this chamber. But anyway, I appreciate my friend very much. I didn't know anything about Senator Russell, but gotten an education. Thank you.
Thank you. Bless you. Yeah. Thank you.
So, and my friend was a former judge in Houston, and in fact, he was the kind of judge that is the only judge in Texas that's allowed to order an exhumation of a body for. We ran into that in one of my criminal trials, and we had to find a justice that would do that. Texas entrusts a great deal into our judges. So I did want to touch on some things that I feel rather passionate about because I know people are being hurt. My friend Chip Roy and I were talking earlier. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Rosendale, a number of people spoke on this, but we can't speak enough on what's happening at the border. It is absolutely a crisis, and it really does need to be dealt with. Regardless of what anybody thinks about President Trump, put that aside. Look at the border and look at what it does to people who have been standing in line for years to come into this country legally. And since we know, and it's been established numerous times, people are not allowed to cross the southern border unless they pay something to the drug cartels. It may be paid through the gang member, through the coyote that's bringing them into the country, but it's still the drug cartels. They're still in the drug business. They're still in the prostitution and sex trafficking business. And it disturbs me that not enough Americans are upset about how much sex trafficking has gone on. They get absolutely worked up when they find out an American has been pulled into sex trafficking and not allowed to get out of it. But it happens all the time, especially with Hispanics from south of our border. The rapes that occur along the way have been established by different groups and means. It is just an abomination that more people are not upset, deeply upset about what's going on, enough so that a majority in both chambers, House and Senate, would do something about it, not leave incentives out there dangling to lure more people into dealing with the drug cartels. It used to be they made most of their money from the drug trafficking, and that's still probably true. But as I started to mention earlier, my friend Chip Roy, we had an article dangled in our hearing. It says, more drugs came in through public ports of entry than came through illegally across other parts of the border. But what I have seen with my own eyes and heard with my own ears, spending a lot of time down on the border Border Patrol, when they see a big group, especially with a bunch of children, most of the ones I talk to say, we know. We get a group like that, see the drug cartels are coordinating when they come across the border, especially there at the river south of McAllen. They know when they send a group like that, it's going to take, and especially in the middle of the night, it's going to take a lot of Border Patrolmen to go through, ask the questions, document, in process each one. And so they will tell you that's when we know they are sending drugs. Sometimes it may be a high value person that they're trying to get across into the U.S. But I know one night on the Texas Department of Public Safety boats, they've got a couple of them there at that part of the river, and they have the thermal technology, they've got the X-ray, the night vision, and so they were identifying people along the river waiting to come across. And the Border Patrol identified the groups, and eventually the Border Patrol said, why don't you guys go back to the dock and then we'll catch them trying to enter? Well, I thought that meant they would be turned away, but this was during the Obama administration, and their instructions were, no, don't turn anybody away, just in-process them. And there were numerous groups of, more than 10, 20 size, and that we got the report from the Border Patrol. We caught all of the groups that were going to cross, but those groups of 2 or 3 that appeared to be bringing drugs, they somehow knew where to come across and come into some bushes, and we never found them. It is impossible for anyone to report how much in the way of drugs comes across our border outside of a public port of entry, an official port of entry, because they don't catch them. And in fact, it seems like, from my experience of being there, I've seen going down, I've seen, actually it surprised me, sure surprised them, but there were some guys that were up on a pump cage, and they were on the move. They had people with them. They were on the move. And it was because they knew a big group had just come across the Rio Grande River, and the Border Patrol, they had seen the truck. I knew the direction they came from. I'd seen the truck. They knew that the Border Patrol would have to zoom to where all those people were, have to get some kind of a bus like they have there, and process all those people at the site, then get them on the bus and bring them in to McAllen. And so these guys knew all the Border Patrol are tied up with the people, and they had a bunch of kids in that group. So that meant they really had to concentrate on that group. And these were clearly people that were doing something illicit and illegal. I didn't see their drugs, but they clearly were doing something very illicit, and they also knew that the Border Patrol was going to be tied up. I'd visited with Border Patrol and had seen what they were doing, watched some of them processing, but they knew how long it took to in-process a group like that. They knew they had time to do what they wanted, and it was only a mile or 2 up the road from where they knew the Border Patrol was occupied. So there were a couple of guys up as lookouts and some others that were carrying something down below, but they all took off into the trees, and I didn't know if they were armed, and I wasn't armed at the time, so I didn't pursue them, but you got to know there's a lot of things that cross the border that nobody has accounted for. And look at the business model. The business model for the drug cartels is if you don't have any conscience, it's a great business model. Fortunately, most people I know do have a conscience and would never do this. But without a conscience, they're thinking, okay, we need drug salespeople in every town in America. All we have to do is get them across the border, give them the address where we want them to sell drugs. They give that to the Border Patrol, and either HHS or ICE gets them where we want them. That's why Border Patrol said the drug cartels call us their logistics. They get their future employees across the border. They think that they're just coming and going to have a free life in America, but they're going to be working for the drug cartels. And it's not slavery, as that abomination is known, but it's a form of indentured servitude. They owe being in the United States to the drug cartels, and they're going to have to pay them. They made that deal to get into the U.S., and the reason they were willing to make that deal to get in the U.S. now is because they keep hearing the Biden administration is going to let everybody in and give them all amnesty. So that lures more and more people into these terrible circumstances, and it needs to stop. I will repeat again what I've been saying for years. The most caring, compassionate thing we could do for our neighbor Mexico, its citizens to the south of us, when we know they've got great raw materials, great minerals, they've got wonderful, hardworking people, they got people, a majority of whom believe in God, as most of the founders did. They love their families, and I love watching Hispanic family reunion. It reminds me so much of reunions I used to see in the town where I grew up. They love their families. That's a wonderful thing. These attributes that folks south of the border have, those are things that help make America the greatest nation in the world, and we need more of what they have. But it needs to be done legally. And to not care at the way that they are manipulated by the cartels, their business model, send them across. U.S. taxpayers will pay to ship them to whatever town we want them to sell drugs in or be involved in prostitution or human trafficking themselves. The U.S. taxpayers will pay to ship them there. And then once there, they all know, we know where their families are in Mexico or Central America, and they will keep paying as long as we tell them, or they know we don't mind cutting off heads, cutting off appendages, and sending the message. So the best thing we could do, though, secure the border. Dry up that tens of billions of dollars, maybe over $100 billion a year that they get from the drug business, from the human trafficking, from the sex trafficking. Dry that money up. We'll never dry it completely up because there are always people that will look for ways, but you cut that 80, 100 billion or so down to even 10 billion, it dries up their ability to control so much of the national and local government. It would surely put an end to so many policemen, police chiefs, mayors that have stood up to the cartels only to have their heads cut off and in some cases put on a pike. We're providing the money in this country to the drug cartels to create corruption run amok in the Mexican government. So caring, compassionate people would say, let's dry up the drug cartel's money, and that will do more for the American people. They won't have to put their lives at risk or risk sexual abuse, all kinds of abuse, death, being left by a coyote out in the desert somewhere. They won't have to risk that because the country they love, many will say, I'd rather stayed there if there were opportunity. They get the opportunity if we help end the corruption. But there's corruption enough. Talking to a DA agent earlier this afternoon, there's so much corruption you don't know who in even the national government is on the payroll of the drug cartels. So let's help the Mexican people, Central American people, even some from South America. Let's help them by giving them the freedom in their own country without a corrupt government, so they can have the kind of freedom we have here. And then this article, March 10th, Alex Nitzberg says more than 92,000 Clark County, Nevada mail ballots returned undeliverable in the general election. And it talks about corruption in the last election. Just tragic stuff. We keep heading this direction, and we are surely going to end up like some of these corrupt countries. But there's another article I just seen today that indicates that Venezuelans are coming from Venezuela into the United States illegally. And why are they doing that? It's because of the corruption and oppression in Venezuela under their progressive socialist country government down there. They have taken what many say was the most prosperous, vibrant country in South America, Venezuela, all the oil they had there. They took that country, and as socialism will ultimately do wherever it's tried, turned it into a fiasco, so the Venezuelans were fleeing and coming to the United States. And the question continues to come as to what will Americans do, where will they go when the path we're on to become the devastated Venezuela are perpetrated on America? Where will Americans go? They can't go to Venezuela. It's already been economically and socially destroyed by the socialists. And as friends from Australia had told me a few years ago, if anything happens to the United States, you're not going to be coming to the freedom in the United States. You're not going to be coming to Australia. They felt like China would take them over before anybody in the U.S. had time to go there. There will be no place to go. Venezuela, they've got America to try to get into, since their wonderful, vibrant country has been destroyed by socialism. We won't have any place. As I think Reagan said, this is the last best chance on earth. We have been so blessed. And the old saying about give a man a fish and he can eat for a day, give him or teach him how to fish and he can eat for a lifetime, instead of just saying, yeah, come on to America, we'll let everybody in and we'll all pay you welfare, we'll give you free health care, and ultimately the whole system will be bankrupt and nobody will have any place to go. Why not help them get rid of the corruption, and stay in the country they love. And then we've got neighbors like Mexico and Venezuela, if we can help them stop the corruption, with whom we can trade, we can visit, we can vacation. My wife and I had our honeymoon at a place in Mexico. We haven't been back in recent years, though we thought about it as we keep celebrating anniversaries. It would be nice to go back where we had our honeymoon, but there's just too much corruption in Mexico, and it's not worth the chance, in our opinion. So wouldn't it be wonderful if we took a stand, we dried up the drug culture, the drug cartels' money by securing our southern border, and then the Mexican people have a vibrant country that we Americans fall in love with all over again. We visit, vacation there, they visit, vacation here, and we mutually help each other. But continuing to fund tens of billions of dollars to go to the drug cartels in Mexico keeps the Mexican people under the thumb of the drug cartel corruption. Now, going back to the point about the DEA, the U.S. government, they cannot know how much in the way of drugs that they don't know about. And I know I've got friends on the other side of the aisle that think, oh, well, there's a report, there's more drugs going through our public ports of entry than there are going across our border where we don't know they're crossing. The truth is, we don't know what we don't know about how much and what kind of drugs are coming across our border. I know I voted against putting Sudafed behind the counter, but I understood drugstores, grocery stores had a problem with people stealing them because that was an ingredient in making methamphetamine. But according to what pharmacies and others tell me, law enforcement in Texas, okay, once you put Sudafed behind the counter, making it harder to get, certainly harder to steal, homegrown meth ceased being the problem it used to, and now we're getting much stronger drugs coming from Mexico, and they're much more addictive than even the methamphetamine. And I had enough people come in meth cases that I totally understand it's extremely addictive. But now we've got more and worse drugs coming from Mexico than what we had when they were homemade. It did get more difficult for a while when a new way of cooking methamphetamine, what they called a cold cook, didn't smell as bad. For so long, it was easy to find meth plants because they smelled so bad. But anyway, how much meth being cooked, not to the extent it used to be in Texas, they're bringing up stronger, more addictive, more individual destroying drugs from Mexico. President Trump did what he could to get the border secured. We were on the way to a much more secure border. In fact, people are not aware, in the second term of George W. Bush, a number of Texas members of Congress were upset that more had not been done by a Republican administration headed by a Texan to secure our border. And actually, President Bush had Karl Rove meet with us, and we began to meet every 2 weeks, as I recall, and Rove would have the latest report every 2 weeks about how much progress was being made towards securing our border. One thing that he didn't have, that President Bush didn't have, was more fence or walls on the southern border, which makes it easier. Sure, people can build a bigger ladder, as some used to say, but it at least slows them down where it's easier to keep them out of the country with their illicit, illegal drugs and sex trafficking. So President Trump knew the value of a wall, and his knowledge of how important a wall or fence was has been totally and for all time confirmed by the Democratic administration and the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader, as evidenced by the wall or fence, whatever you want to call it, with all the razor wire around the top. Some places you got 2 layers of that. So all this time, people were saying, you know, it doesn't help, you can't stop people, doesn't do any good. But we knew it did good because former President Obama got him a new house up somewhere around here and built a 10-foot wall around it. So we knew, regardless of what people were saying, they knew that a wall or fence could make a difference. But we're hoping that since there is no threat and since the concerns that the Speaker and Majority Leader here in the House had, that there was going to be another inauguration last Thursday, we knew that wasn't going to happen. I was surprised that they were believing QAnon. I didn't know anybody on our side that believed QAnon. But apparently the Speaker and Majority Leader were concerned that QAnon knew what he or she or they or whatever it is were talking about. So we called off Congress. They called off Congress last Thursday. So we're hoping that as they see that their beliefs and their concerns are being assuaged, the acting chief of the Capitol Police has confirmed there is no member of Congress that's a threat to another member of Congress, no intel from any source that indicates that. I have had friends across the aisle say, well, Lauren Boebert, you know, talked about wanting to bring a gun on the floor, and that's scary. Well, that's also a testimony that firearms can be the great equalizer. Lauren tells me she's 5 foot exactly. So that should reaffirm if she's got people in this body that are concerned about her, it's not because of her 5 foot status, it's because sometimes she has a firearm with her, and it truly is the great equalizer. And I don't hear a lot of people talking about the number of lives that are saved by law-abiding citizens that have firearms and prevent crimes. But I see my time is expiring, and at this time, I would yield back. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 4th, 2021, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman, for 30 minutes.
Thank you. I rise today to speak one more time about the current issue at the border. We have gone from a situation in which 1 year ago at this time, there were 36,000 confrontations at the border to, in last February, 100,000 encounters at the border. In addition to, out of threefold increase, there has been a corresponding increase in unaccompanied children at the border. How did this happen? There are several policies that should be reinstituted immediately. First of all, prior to President Trump being sworn in, we had a policy in which the Mexican government was keeping people on their side of the border pending an asylum hearing. We have now undone that policy, which does three things. First of all, new people arrive at the border, are escorted in the United States, and sent somewhere inland. Secondly, people who've been waiting on the Mexican side of the border are coming across. And thirdly, you are sending the message around the world that the United States is not enforcing their immigration laws the way they are intended to be enforced. The word gets out, be it in Central America, be it in Mexico, be it in Asia, be it in Brazil, the United States is inviting people in. And with that situation comes the threefold increase. Jay Johnson, the Secretary of Homeland Security under President Obama, said at one time that 1,000 encounters a day at the southern border was a bad number. We now have 3 times what was considered a bad number under Barack Obama. The next thing we're doing is we're getting rid of the agreements we had in Central America. And President Trump maybe tweeted too much, but he engaged in negotiations with Guatemala, with El Salvador, with Honduras, so that people stayed down there rather than coming through Mexico to the United States. He did it to a certain extent with the carrot and stick of foreign aid which the United States had sent to those countries. That policy has also changed. And with the change in that policy, people are streaming up through Central America. Again, from year to year, there's been a 61% increase in unaccompanied children. People purport to say that they care about people being separated from their parents. Well, when you have more and more unaccompanied children showing up at the border, what do you think that means? These people inevitably are going to wind up separated from their parents, keeping families apart. I should point out, by the way, another thing that I'm told bothers Central American countries. In this country, in an effort to sometimes keep a child with both parents, if the parents don't get along that well, courts make an effort to keep both parents in the same region. I am told that the Central American countries do not like the fact that the United States sometimes will take children with even one parent, leaving the other parent behind. It would be, I think, better if we improved our relationship with those countries by trying to keep parents with both children. Other things that have been done is, sadly, we stopped the border wall construction. And when I was down at the border, we learned with regard to the border wall, it takes 4 or 5 agents to man 2 miles of the old wall, which was sometimes a little more than minor fencing. We now go, the new wall, we took 1 Border Patrol agent for 2 miles, so there's a substantial savings there as well. The catch and release policies are back, and with it, a crisis coming. America has to apply more pressure or tell the Biden administration, please, there is a reason why we have tripled the number of people, the number of encounters our Border Patrol is having today compared to this time last year. It is the policies that have been implemented in the first month and a half of the Biden administration. Please, President Biden, go back to the old policies in which people are held on the southern border and people can get a good hearing on their asylum claims rather than creating a system in which, as a practical matter, people come here illegally and wind up just blending into the system. It is unfair to the people who are trying to access our country legally, and the people coming here illegally are skipping ahead of them. And inevitably, as we take people without vetting them, we are getting a given number of people taking advantage of our benefits, and we are getting a given number of people who are sneaking illegal drugs across the southern border. So again, we have sent letters to President Biden, and I please ask him to respond to these letters and let the American public know, what is your plan to stop 100,000 people a month coming across the border before that 100,000 becomes 200,000 or 300,000? And it will become 200,000 or 300,000 because people around the world are watching the president. And if the president continues to make it clear he does not intend to enforce the border, people from all around the world will be coming here. Thank you.
Does the gentleman yield back?
Yes.